Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Hello, and welcome to Backstage Pass. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with someone whose story is truly out of this world, literally. Mike Massimino is a former NASA astronaut, a veteran of 2 space shuttle missions, and a celebrated spacewalker who repaired the Hubble Space Telescope. Beyond that, he's an incredible keynote speaker. He brings authenticity, credibility, and inspiration to every stage that he steps on. If you're an event planner and you're searching for a speaker who can captivate any audience, well, then you're in for a treat. Mike, thank you so much, and I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for that intro. I'm afraid to say anything now. I don't think I can top what you said. That was wonderful. Thank you. Very kind.
So, Mike, let's start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a specific moment or a person that sparked your dream of becoming an astronaut?
Gail, yes, there was. I can show you. I know some of this, someone will be listening only, but for those of you who have video, this is what got me interested. I'm showing a picture of the moon landing, the first moonwalk, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. And I was so inspired by that. I was 6 years old. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember this, right? So I was 6 years old, and here's my proof that wanted to be. This is me as an astronaut, dressed up like an astronaut in the backyard. The reason that it's a gray flight suit I'm wearing is because it's a converted elephant costume from the first grade play. And I'm holding my astronaut Snoopy there, Gail. And Snoopy came to space with me, and he's in the scene here. Again, for those of you who can see in the background, you see my Snoopy back there? In the back. So Snoopy's still with me. So Snoopy was a bit of an inspiration, but it was the moon landing. I saw that, and it wasn't just the landing; it was those astronauts. Neil Armstrong became my hero. I wanted to grow up to be him, and then after I was about 8 years old, I realized I'm never going to grow up to be Neil Armstrong. That's when I discovered I was afraid of heights. I still don't like heights, by the way, and that has caused some problems from time to time for me in my career. But I was able to get over that, and deal with it. But I never thought it could happen. And the second thing that inspired me later on in life, when I was a senior in college, I was studying engineering, and I went to see this movie, The Right Stuff, which is about the original astronauts and the test pilots that came before them. And I read the book by Tom Wolfe, and that kind of kicked me. I was a senior in college, and that kind of kicked me back into mode of, hey, why not? Things, if you're willing to give it a try, maybe it can happen. And I had no delusions that it would happen. But I thought at least I could be part of the space program. But that's what it was. I was inspired as a little boy by the moon landing, and then as an older person getting out of college by a movie and the movie and book, The Right Stuff.
That's so awesome. You mentioned your fear of heights. I know from your office visit here that you had to overcome a few obstacles on your path to NASA.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about those and how those challenges maybe shaped some of the core messages and themes that you focus on now in your keynote?
Yeah, absolutely. I was used to, I think, even from a very early age, things don't always work out the first time, and you got to keep trying and keep going back. And if you're having trouble with a certain concept, get help, whatever that might be. As a little kid, we're going to school, we learn those lessons, I think, but they stayed with me my whole life. Where you just got to keep going back and keep trying and not giving up. I started applying to the astronaut program in 1986. I went to grad school in 1986, and I sent in my first application for the class of 1990. That first application, I sent that in. I got a letter back, and it said no. I was rejected. I didn't. No thanks. Waited a couple of years, applied again. Every time NASA said they were looking for astronauts, I applied. I always updated my, I kept in touch with them. Always updated my file every year, and then there were years where you would apply for a class that they were selecting. So the second opportunity, I sent in my next application. And NASA came back and and said no again. A couple of years go by, and I was out of grad school at this point, working at the Johnson Space Center, and I got not a my third application. I didn't even get a letter. I got a phone call. They wanted me to come in for an interview. The interview is a whole week of activity. They get to know you really well. Medical exams, there's social events, there's a selection board interview. You meet lots of people, and they got to know me really well. And with that information, they rejected me. So I was 0 for 3. And only that, I was medically disqualified. Back then, you had to have pretty good vision. All these rules have changed now, but this is a long time ago. This is now 1994 that this was going on. And when I was medically disqualified, they told me that there's nothing I could do about it, and they would never read my application again because you're medically unfit. And that was kind of disappointing, of course, because I couldn't even try. But I found out about something called vision training that was mainly done with children. But I told the optometrist I could be really immature, and she was nice enough to work with me, and I was able to improve my vision, a little bit, enough anyway, with these exercise techniques that I could at least try again. And so I applied again, got another interview, passed the eye exam, and was picked on a fourth try. And I think that theme, a lot of people identify with that. I tell that type of a version of that story to just about every audience, because I think perseverance is something, whether you're a young person or an older person, or you're a person, a manager or a salesperson, or whatever your position is, you're gonna meet obstacles in life. And as long as you don't give up, it's often I tell people 1 out of 1 million is not zero. It's a non-zero number. It might not, even things that you're thinking of, your own moonshot you're trying to make, and as long as you try, there's that chance, and you owe it to yourself to at least try to achieve your goal. And you never know what could happen. And if it doesn't, it'll probably lead you to a path that's pretty good anyway. So I think
I love
perseverance is
that.
probably the most important thing we can keep in mind when we're trying to accomplish things as a team or individually.
Well, you just led me to my next question. You talked about perseverance as a
Mhm.
team or as
Yeah.
individually. And NASA is really known for their teamwork under
Mhm.
pressure.
Yeah.
And how did your time as an astronaut shape your perspective on collaboration, leadership, teamwork, especially when the stakes are so high?
Yeah, well, I think because the stakes are so high, there could be, it's the mission, it's also the dangerous part of it, that bad things can happen if we're not paying attention and working together. And the only way the culture we had, the only way we were going to be safe in our jobs, as safe as we could be, because you never, still things happen. And the way we could be successful in this complex environment we were working in, was to work together as a team. And that means there's things like, let me show you. First of all, I'll show you quickly here. That's my astronaut class. I'm on the second row from the top, third guy from the left. I don't look like that anymore, Gail. That was a long time ago. That was 1996. But let me show you a picture of me flying in a jet here. Hang on a sec. That's me in the jet. And that's where we
Oh,
learned a lot of these lessons, where how important it is to speak up and work together. And we did our flying, we did our simulations, and our training was very difficult. And what we learned, what we were told, the culture was more, I think, somewhat of a military culture, at least in
yeah.
a fighter squadron kind of, we're in this together kind of thing. We're going to take care of each other. And even though I was a civilian, and we're half civilian military people, it was sort of that culture where we're gonna take care of each other. And that means that if you're able to help someone, your job is to help them. And maybe more important, if you're having trouble with something, Gail, we were encouraged to speak up. When I showed you that picture of the jet, flying in a jet, if you saw something, even though I was a very inexperienced person in the airplane, I was always encouraged to speak up. One time I didn't. One of my first flights, I didn't. We almost had an accident because I didn't speak up. We were going the wrong direction. I knew that was happening. I thought the pilot knew what he was doing, and we almost hit another airplane. And then, he said, "What happened? What did you know?" And I go, "Yeah, we were going in the wrong direction." He goes, "Well, you didn't say anything?" I go, "Well, I thought you knew what you were doing." That was the end of that conversation until we got on the ground. And it was my buddy Jim Kelly. Vegas was a very experienced pilot in front of me. It was one of our first flights. One of my first, I had like 3 hours in the aircraft. And he said, "Mike, we almost got killed because I went the wrong way, but we almost got killed because you didn't speak up. And you need to speak up. If you're wrong, I'll still say thank you. Thank you for speaking up. But it's better to speak up and be wrong than to stay silent and have something bad happen. And that's maybe an extreme case because it was a potential life-threatening situation, but also in the way we would be forming our procedures and doing what we needed to do to get ready to fly in space. So I'll give you another. This is another shot for those of you looking video. This is us training underwater at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. That's me on the left and my buddy Mike Good on the right. And we were always trying to figure out a way to do things better. And I think, a lot of the audience as I speak to, their companies they're trying to, can we do a little bit better? How do we stay up on the competition? And so if we could save even 1 minute of spacewalking time, that was significant. And a lot of times the good ideas came from the sources you wouldn't expect. Sometimes the newest people have a good idea and you want to encourage them to speak up. You might get a lot of bad ideas, but you never want to crush an idea. And that was, I think, part of our culture too, that you don't when someone comes forward with something, don't crush it, because even if it's a bad idea, when they come forward with it, and you say, well, you explain it to them why it might not be the best idea, but later on they're going to come up with another idea that's going to be pretty good. But if you crush it, you won't hear from them. And also, when you make a mistake, you have to admit it. This was really important. That was really the only unforgivable sin we had, is that if you made a mistake, it was okay. I think people are going to make mistakes, but you got to come forward with it. And if you didn't, that was unforgivable. And there's examples that I share of that as well. But it was communicating. It was sharing ideas. Everyone has a voice. If you have a problem, we have a problem. Even if it's a problem at home, if you had a sick kid, if you were going through something in your personal life, you came forward with that and told your crew about that, told your supervisors about that, because they were there to help you and to understand what mattered most was the mission. And I've never been in an organization, for me, that was the number one experience of that I had. The thing I missed the most from NASA was that camaraderie we had. But that is also the kind of thing that people can have in their organizations, that you can have in your organization too, Gail, where everyone's pulling in the same direction. Everyone's there to help each other. Everyone cares about the other person. And that's the way we built our success. And so that really helps in a high pressure situation, that everyone has got that same goal. It's the mission that matters. And whether you're the person cleaning the locker room, or you're the astronaut or the flight director, everyone has that same goal. Everyone is getting ready for the mission to help a crew fly in space and to accomplish the goals we had. So,
I love how that translates to any organization.
yeah, you
Mike,
can have it
you
anywhere.
said something
Mhm.
that I've never really thought about, that you were a civilian. And I
Yeah.
guess, I don't know, I guess when you said that, I'm like, oh, is that unusual? Do most people come the military path, or is it equal? I'm curious.
It's about half and half, maybe a little heavier on the military side, but it's about half and half. Our test pilots, which they still have test pilots, even though we don't have a vehicle that you fly any longer. Like the space shuttle was, an aircraft more or less when it came back to Earth, even though it'd been in space. But we still have test pilots. We have Navy SEALs. We have various occupations in the military, and we also have a lot of civilians. So it's still, it's somewhere around 50-50. And I thought it took the best of both worlds, so some of these things with leadership and taking care of each other, and just caring about each other and caring about the families, and supporting each other, that I think came out of the best of the military culture, where you're all sticking together, and we're doing this thing that's really cool and dangerous. We're doing it for the country, but we're also doing it for the world, to increase for exploration, increase our knowledge of what's out there in the universe, and build the space station and all these things. So it had this sort of teamwork culture that came from the military, but also I think a lot of free thinking and interesting things that came more from academia, maybe a little bit,
Yeah.
like coming up with crazy ideas. My friend Charlie Hobaugh, his nickname was Scorch, and there was a few of us, like they had me and my friend Steve McLean and Don Pettit, who's in space right now, by the way. But we were
Oh,
like
wow.
we were like these PhD civilian astronauts, and he would walk in and he goes, "How are the nutty professor mad scientists doing right now?" Because that's what he called us. So, but I thought it really blended the best of both worlds, and the military folks we had were really, in some weird way, admired what we did as civilians. Like, the things we accomplished. And of course, these men and women who from the military who I work with, I just was enamored with what they could do. with airplanes and other things that they had done in their career. So it
Sounds
really
like a
was
real
a good
culture
team.
of mutual respect.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
and being able to, things change, being able to adapt and accept different cultures and understand things are going to change. Change is a very popular topic, right? When I go and speak to audiences, we weren't just Americans. And when I came to NASA in 1996, the space station became operational in 2000. The first launch of a piece of it was in 1998. So nothing had been launched yet for the space station, but we were planning this International Space Station. So my astronaut class, the picture I showed you earlier, had 8 different countries in it. It wasn't just the United States. And we were working with the Russians at the time too. We started build. They were a major partner. We're still working with them in space, still an International Space Station. So it was not just the American military civilian cultures, but also cultures from around the world. And now we're working with private companies too to launch people into space. And so it's kind of this kind of conglomeration of things that. But again, the goal is the same, so we all can agree on what we're trying to accomplish.
Can you take us back and talk about that incredible experience that you had of working on the Hubble Space Telescope and any particular lessons that you might have learned in space that you bring to your keynote presentations?
Uh, yes. I think I can show you a quick photo again here. This is, by the way, this is me spacewalking, Gail. Can you imagine? So that's me spacewalking on my first flight, and that's a view of the planet there. But let me get to this is a spacewalk that I often talk about, and I talk about working with our control center there. That's our control center sometimes.
Yeah.
But the story I almost always tell, or I often tell anyway, is about a problem I had in space and how I made this critical error where I stripped a bolt on the Hubble Space Telescope on an instrument we were trying to repair. And I quickly realized what I had done was going to not allow us to be successful that day. And we'd never find out if there's life in the universe, and everyone's going to blame me. That's the way I felt about it. And what a couple things happened there was number one is I had to talk to my colleagues inside and on the ground, the control team. So you reach out to your control team, reach out to your mission. So I encourage people, life is difficult. When you make a mistake or you need help, reach out to mission control. And I love the meetings we go to. People sometimes are meeting each other for the first time, especially now coming out of COVID still. I've been to a couple of meetings. They haven't met before. One of the events we had, they hadn't met before COVID, and but getting together like that in person, take advantage of it because you're going to go away, and you can still have those relationships. And so even though we're separated, we're still around. We're still together. We can be connected. And I was connected to the control center, and they were able to save the day. They came up with a solution so that we can move forward. So I think that lesson of reaching out to mission control, also dealing with mistakes, right? When you make a mistake, and I'll show you a picture here. This is me as a sad astronaut. I was very sad when I made this mistake, and one of the things I learned that seems to resonate with audiences was not how to make mistakes. I was always good at that, but how to deal with it after you make one, and don't hide it, fess up, but also how do you move on? I was living a nightmare when this happened, Gail. So two of the things I tell the audience is there's two lessons I learned in my training. One was give yourself 30 seconds of regret, the 30-second rule. You're going to make mistakes. You don't want to make a mistake. But when you do, take a time out, beat yourself up. You're the worst astronaut ever, Mike. How could you have stripped that bolt? Why didn't you? Someone else should have been on this mission. Neil Armstrong will never talk to you again. Don't vocalize any of this stuff. It's all in your head because you'll scare people. But just after that 30 seconds, have your rant for 30 seconds and then move on. Because before I was an astronaut, I would make a mistake or mess something up, and it might be a week before I got over it. And I just beat myself up, and you don't get that week back. Well, spacewalking, you don't have any time to be, to be out of it. You've got to get right back in the game. So you're going to make mistakes, have some regret, and then move on. That's how I was able to move on. And then the second thing I learned was in my training to deal with mistakes during my spacewalk. Because there was always a problem, but this one was the worst when I stripped that bolt. Is that no matter how bad a situation is, Gail, no matter how bad you've messed up, no matter how hopeless it appears, you need to remember you can make it worse. It could always get worse, and you don't want to rush. You don't want to hide the mistake, or you don't want to break stuff, create problem B. so that we have to solve that before we can get back to problem A. And then I'll show you after that, I was a happy astronaut. There it is, a picture of me as smiling at them. But the team came up with a solution. Actually, it was just to tear the thing off manually with brute force, which I didn't think of because we were thinking of things a little bit more complicated. And my team was there for me. I didn't find out the whole story of how they came up with the solution, and I usually tell that story in more detail. But it's, they were coordinating from Houston to the Goddard Space Flight Center to other places around the country to figure out how we could solve this, and it was done quickly. But it's communication, and it's not throwing the person under the bus. Never for one moment did they say, well, you messed up, Mike. That's the end of it. I was never blamed for anything. It was like, oh, this is what happens. Things happen. We're going to try to fix this problem. So I often talk about that, many other lessons, but that in particular seems to resonate with folks.
I love that. The two different points of view, the people at the Houston or the Space Center, and then you in space and coming together and finding a solution. I love that.
Yeah.
So on a lighter note, I know that
Yes.
space travel isn't always serious business.
No.
Are there any funny or unexpected moments from your missions that your audiences like hearing about?
What they generally like, I'll show you a very historic photo. Gail, you ready for this? Let me see this here. This is me sending the first tweet from space, Gail. Can you imagine? Take that, Neil Armstrong. So what happened was the backstory to this is when I became a new astronaut, I met Neil Armstrong. And the first thing I asked him, I said, Neil, I got to ask you, how did you come up with the thing you said on the moon? One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. You're probably familiar. You've heard that, Gail. Most people have heard it. If you weren't alive at that time, like I was, you probably heard it at some point. So I thought
I was.
you look a lot younger than me. So, but the deal is that I heard that as a little kid, and I was like, my goodness, right, Gail? If you heard that when you were a little kid, and that was impressive, wasn't it? It was on all the newspapers. So I asked him, how'd you come up with that? Did your wife tell you to say that? Did you hire a publicist? Who came up with that? And he looks. I saw him in a cafeteria. My first week as an astronaut. I got to go bother this guy. He was in visiting. I didn't want to bother him, but I had to say something. He puts his tray down and he looks at me and he goes, Mike, I didn't think about what I was going to say until I got on the moon. I'm like, really? And he goes, Mike, if I didn't land on the moon, there'd be no reason to say anything. I was like, whoa. And then this is my hero, Gail. He was and I finally meet him. I'm an astronaut, a new astronaut. And he looks at me, gets very serious, and he says, Mike, you're new to this, but this is a dangerous business. And you have to take care of your job first. You can't get distracted with all this public relations and media and all that stuff. Don't get distracted with it. You got to take care of your job first and worry about all that stuff later. And he goes, promise me, Mike, you'll do that. And I said, Neil Armstrong, the greatest hero ever. Yes, I will do that. So I get asked to send the first tweet from Space Gal. On our last press conference, they knew this was going to happen. The press said, have you thought about what you're going to tweet? And I just channeled Neil Armstrong. I said, no, I'm not thinking about that. We've got to get to space. I'm not going to worry about any of that stuff. We got to get to space. If we don't get to space, there's no reason to tweet anything, right? So we get to space, and I open up the computer, as I just showed you in that photo, right? Here it is again. Here I am trying to figure out something. And, my crewmate is taking a picture, and I'm looking at that computer screen, like I'm looking at a computer now, Gail, and I can't think of a thing. I realized the advice I got from Neil Armstrong was the worst advice I ever got in my life. And then after a few minutes, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, there's no way he thought about it that on the moon. I'm just floating above the planet. A few people know where I am, but everyone knew where he was. Everyone was waiting to hear what he was going to say. The whole world, right? Everyone, friend or foe, everyone's listening into this guy. And he's on the moon. And he comes up with that. And I was like, he lied to me. You know what I wanted to tweet, Gail? I wanted to tweet, curse you, Neil Armstrong. But that would have got me in trouble. So I couldn't do that. So what I wrote was, launch was awesome, feeling great, or something like that. And I sent that down to the planet. That was on Monday. On Saturday, I get made fun of on Saturday Night Live. On Weekend Update, Seth Meyers is doing his thing, and he says, we have the first tweet from space, and here it is. Mike Massimino, launch was awesome. In 40 years, we've gone from one giant leap for mankind to launch was awesome. And then he continues, and he says, if we ever find life in the universe, I assume this is how we'll be notified. And it shows my little Twitter thing, and it says, geez, dudes, aliens, right? So he makes fun of me. I don't know that's going on. That spacewalk nightmare that I described earlier was on Sunday. Monday, we had one more spacewalk. And then I go to check my email after the spacewalk is over. I haven't been in contact with anybody haven't been paying attention at all to what's going on the planet for the past. So I get email from my kids. They were both teenagers at the time, and so I see this email again. I'm like, oh, okay. They're going to congratulate me, Dad. We love you. You saved Hubble or whatever. And I open up the email. And it's like, Dad, you'll never guess. They made fun of you on Saturday Night Live. All the kids at school loved it. Keep saying stupid stuff. So that is the background of the historic first tweet from space.
That's the ultimate dad story. I love
Yeah.
it.
And I
I
gave
love
you the
it.
long version, Gail. I apologize for that. I don't
No,
always,
I love it.
sometimes I can condense it, but
Yeah,
anyway, that seems to be a
no, I love
story
it.
that a lot
That's
of
a good
audiences
one. I
like.
love that.
Yeah.
So, Mike, what audiences do you most typically find yourself speaking at? I
Mhm.
know, they fall into many categories, but
Mhm.
right now we're ending January. And so we're
Yeah.
coming off a lot of sales kickoff meetings.
Yeah.
Then we're
Yeah.
going into February, March, April.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of sales incentive trips. And then there's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
leadership meetings. Where do you find that you usually land?
It seems to be all of the above, and the message is different for each one. And that's kind of what I like is that, it's never the same talk. It's always something different. It's always a different audience. But yeah, a lot of sales, certainly a lot of sales teams where it's about perseverance and not giving up and figuring out another way to do things. And sometimes it's about teamwork in those situations too. It depends how how they're operating. Sometimes it's the leadership. Some of the leadership lessons I share, I learned from some great leaders in the astronaut office. The one that seems to resonate, particularly leadership group, is what I was taught was a key to leadership was find a way to care for and admire everyone on your team. And they have to know that you care about them and you admire them and you value what they bring to the team. And if you find someone that you might not like, or you don't get along with, don't think of it as you don't like them. Think of it as you don't know them well enough. And take that extra time to get to know them. Especially if someone's having an issue with the team, or you don't want to splinter the team. So take that individual. It seems there's a problem. Get to know them. Find out what you like about them, care about them, and then have that in your bank of good thoughts when you have to deal with an issue. Lead with that in your head, so you don't sever a relationship. So these are things I will often share with a leadership group. Um, but it's all kinds of stuff. I mean, different, sales groups, leadership groups, a lot of incentive trips. Every once in a while, I'll do like an educational sort of audience,
Mhm.
where I just, spoke at a school that has, once a year has a speaker come in, or a community organization sometimes will have a speaker come in. But it's a wide variety, and the industries are different too, as pharmaceuticals or the finance industry, or hospitality. I'm thinking of the ones I've done lately. Those are the ones that communications, tech, a lot of tech groups. A lot of them are dealing with change. Change seems to be a very popular thing, whether it's organizational change or incorporating AI, whatever it might be. So a wide variety of groups, organizations, and sometimes multiple talks of the same company, but it's a different audience each time.
So I want to circle back to the
Mhm.
incentive groups.
Yeah,
A lot of times, those are top award winners,
yeah,
and they often get to bring their spouse or their
right,
partner.
yeah,
They really don't want to go to a business meeting, but they got to have a half
yeah,
day while they're, in
yeah.
this fabulous resort. So when you have
Hmm.
top achievers, they're at a resort, they've got their
Hmm.
partners, how
Yeah.
do you tweak your message for that audience?
For that one, what I always do is I like having at least one pre-event call with the group to understand what that audience is there for. And you're right. I mean, a lot of those incentive trips are in some really nice places, Gail. Right? So those are
Yes.
great, like really nice places, and they have significant other with them, and that person comes from some other world, right?
Right.
Professionally. And so what I'll do with that is it'll be more of should I say, I don't know if entertainment driven.
Okay,
There's still
fair.
some messages there, but they're more, and especially these people are top achievers. Sometimes you're in with a bunch of CEOs. I want to ask them for advice. Some of these people are very, hey, help me out, will you? I could use it. They're really a well-established group of people, and they're senior, and they have their spouse with them. And sometimes it's a huge event with other folks, and I've had those too. It's just really big audiences and like a whole sales team or a tech team comes in and they're being rewarded. But depending on where that is, if it seems like what you're describing is more the intimate kind of smaller group where it's a really big deal and you're very successful to begin with, and now you're there to provide some info. I try to do a couple things. I try to entertain them. I try to take them to space because most likely none of them have been to space. So I can share with them how cool it is to fly in space, what it's like to view the planet. I'll show you, a shot of that coming up here. So here we go. This is a shot of the planet. So I'll talk about the beauty of the planet, that
Mhm.
I believe we're living in a paradise. I can't imagine any place more beautiful than on planet Earth. So I'll talk about those experiences. I'll talk about what it's like to launch into space, the things you do to get ready, what that whole experience is like, what you feel, what you hear, what it's like when you're all of a sudden in zero gravity for the first time. Your arms just float up in front of you. So I'll describe that. I'll also try to tell some of my what I think are more funny or entertaining stories, but just try to make it so it's not a necessarily a message that's aligned with a meeting theme. It could be, but typically it's more like, hey, Mike, we want you to entertain us and get us through dessert. We want it
Yeah.
to be special. But we don't need a lot of whatever there's not necessarily a theme even to the meeting because a lot of times it's different folks from different places. But that's different than when it's like a theme. Maybe they're having difficulty in a company, and they want to have this message, and I try to align with what their messaging is, and so we're all kind of pushing in the same direction for their meeting. The incentive ones are more kind of like just let's have a little fun here, and make it so that it's not it's also sometimes I've had kids. Sometimes there's kids there too, so we want to make it kid friendly. Certainly family friendly, but also kid friendly. And so that's more of a kind of a could be a more of a generic with a little bit of lessons in there. There's always lessons learned, but it's more of hey, this is how cool it is to fly in space, and this is what's going on. Some of these financial folks want to know about what's going on in the future, like where do you think the success is going to be for these different companies, or where is the future of space going? So sometimes there's that there too, but especially when it's a spousal event, it's more of, let's talk about the human side of it, and I'll tell them the story about my kids and
Yeah, that's awesome.
yep,
That's awesome. Well, you can tell that you're very experienced and you understand that different audiences require different messages. So I appreciate that.
yep, and it could change
Or,
from day to day.
yeah,
I've
isn't
had
that the
to,
truth?
I've had sometimes something happen. I was at one company where they were pulling their product off the shelf that day, and they were going to tell them before lunch, and I was the speaker after lunch. So the whole theme of the talk changed at the last minute. We
Yeah,
talked about overcoming obstacles, and I talked about the shuttle accidents and overcoming them and disappointments and
nice
things like
pivot.
that. So
Love
yeah,
that.
it can change.
So, I know when I was an event planner, the question I always wanted to
Mhm,
know, and don't think I'm asking you to brag on yourself. I really want the event
mhm,
planners to know the answer to this. Typically, when you've nailed it, and I know you have a
mhm,
reputation for always nailing it, but at the end of your presentations,
mhm,
what kind of feedback do you get? What do people come up and say? What's
mhm,
the response? That's really helpful when someone's making a decision like this.
mhm. I think what they seem to like they like the storytelling as far as the talk goes. They like the storytelling. They like the way I'm able to shape it so it's talking about what they're going through at that time. So in other words, if it's a making the message, tailoring it. No two talks are the same. So trying to tailor it, I think they really appreciate that it really met with the themes of the company for that day or the audience or whatever they were looking for of really hitting what the objective was of what they were expecting of, that's one thing. I think the other thing they like is that, I put in as much time as they want me to. If they want, a lot of, if they want to have a couple pre-event calls, I'm happy to do that. I try to get there with enough time that I can kind of get a feel for the audience and understand what they're doing. Sometimes I sign an NDA so I can look at stuff that I so I can understand what's happening. I think they appreciate that I do the homework and know who it is I'm talking to. None of these things are ever a burden for me. I really love telling people. It's my favorite. I relive my life as an astronaut. I get to relive it and share all these things. And that's what I like doing as an astronaut. When I was as an astronaut, I realized that there were other things I may not be that great at, but telling the story of what we were doing, I was so enthusiastic about that. I wasn't the best spacewalker. I was pretty good, Gail, but I wasn't. But I always enjoyed telling the stories, and that's what I like doing is telling people about my experiences. And so telling that, I like doing that. I think they like the enthusiasm. Also, I like it's not a burden for me to hang around if I'm able to sign books or take pictures with people. This flight suit you can't really see so well. It's got all patches on it and everything. Makes me look more like an astronaut. So I always bring this thing with me, right? So usually I'll wear a business or I'll bring two options and see what what the planner wants. But at least for photos, I'll wear this and people like want to ask me, the question. I love doing Q&A, right? I love doing the talking, and I look at Q&A as more stories. Now they tell me which ones they really want to know. And so I think going that extra little bit, whether it's, doing a meet and greet, making sure I'm well prepared ahead of time, doing little things. I do, like I'm going to record a promotional video when we get off of this. Now that I got the camera hooked up, a little promotional video to encourage people to come to this event. I'm active on this Twitter thing, that this first tweet, being the first guy to tweet from space, got me involved with social media. So I'm happy to help out with social media as well.
Right.
I think it's those little, I think it's like showing up, and I really love doing it and try to do the best job I can. I think they really appreciate that, and interacting where the people feel like the audiences feel like they learn something. The feedback I get is, they can come up with these are the takeaways. And sometimes I get amazing notes from people of how it changed the way they were doing things and how much it meant to them in their lives and so on. So I think overall, getting a chance to give a keynote is a chance to be life-changing for the people in the audience. And maybe that doesn't always happen, but I think if we look at it as that type of opportunity where you can really help people and what they're doing individually, but also as a team in their company, that's what I try to strive for. And that's a lot of the feedback I get. When I get that type of feedback is very gratifying, of course.
That's awesome. Um, I wanted to go back to one thing you were talking about,
Mhm.
Q&A.
Yeah.
And I know I have one client in particular, and
Hmm.
they wrestle with the question of,
Hmm.
is it better to end on a high note with the speaker
Hmm.
or open it up to the Q&A? And their concern or their risk on opening it up is that someone stands up, gets the microphone, and asks a long, laborious question, and you sort of
Yeah.
lose the vibe.
Hmm.
Or worse yet, that horrible thing where no one asks a question. So
Yeah.
to planners out there kind of grappling with,
Hmm.
should we open up for Q&A? Should we not open up for Q&A? What are your thoughts as they pertain to you, obviously?
I love the Q&A, Gail. I've never had crickets. Sometimes it might be a little slow, meaning they have to get the microphone to somebody. But I also, sometimes they ask, so they're worried about this. We're going to plant a couple questions. We'll send them to you ahead of time. I don't want I mean, they can ask me anything they want, but so I don't really care to see the question. And then I think it loses a little spontaneity in that case. But what I like doing is let them listen to me first. And so if you're going to ask an astronaut a question, Gail, before you met them and before you had asked, how do you go to the bathroom? Were you scared? Did you see any UFOs? That kind of thing, right? But if you're gonna listen after my talk, what I'll hear is, what made it? How come you didn't give up? What was in your mind that you kept going and didn't give up? Or how do you? Sometimes they'll ask me something somewhat related, but maybe I didn't talk to about, like maybe how do you build up that trust in your organization? In fact, I was doing I spoke at an investment company, and they were having me come back, and they said, we want you to, what really resonated with our folks was when you talked about trust. And I'm like, what did I talk about trust? And they said, it came up in the Q&A. I was like, did it? Yeah, I didn't even remember because it was the Q&A. And I'm like, that's right. And so I started thinking about that as a theme. That's why I love getting feedback, is because you see what really works with the audience. And then you can
Yeah.
kind of, all right, this is something that happens. And a lot of those things are discovered for me in the Q&A. If there were that some of their, we're trying to make a hiring decision. How do you make hiring decisions at NASA? How do you hand out responsibilities to new people? These different things, sometimes it's like they'll listen to what I'm saying and they want to go a little bit deeper, or they'll ask something somewhat related, but it's very intimate in the Q&A. And if they've already heard me talk, right? And sometimes they ask about UFOs too. That's okay. But I think we try to craft the talk with the client, this is what I think they want to know, or what I think will work. And then for the Q&As, now they're going to tell me what they want to know. No, we really want to know about we want to know more about this, or what about that? So I think it's great. I think a mix of it. I think, a talk, whatever, 45, 50 minutes, and then 10 of Q&A if you want to go, generic 1 hour, but it could be
Right.
a little shorter or longer. But I kind of like both of it. I also get that interaction with the people. And they,
Yeah.
if I can, hopefully I'm not running out the door. I can say, hey, you didn't get your question answered. Come up and talk to me after, during a break, and that's what happens too. So they feel like it's a dialogue, and they're able to come. And that's, again, that interaction I find to be really fun and gratifying. I think very effective. So that's what I
And
would suggest.
I'm assuming this has appeal to global attendees because space is bigger than the US, but
Yes.
what is the reaction from people from other parts of the world?
A lot of parts of the world do have a space program, but it's a little bit, I guess for, in the United States, we're so used to a space program, I think. And in
Yeah.
other countries, they're not necessarily that used to it, but a lot of them have it, but they don't have as much. So, for example, in the UK, there's a couple astronauts. My good friend Tim Peake is him, and there was Helen Sharman flew many years ago before he did. So there's an understanding of that the space program exists, but not like we have here in the United States, where we've had so many astronauts, right? But I think though when I do those, it seems to me, Gail, when I do those talks over I'm thinking, I've done in Europe, in the Middle East, any for the Far East. I've done it, those places I've gone to. Um, they're not really necessarily hiring just to be an astronaut. They're looking for the messages. I think that if people are just looking for an astronaut, it's kind of like, oh, anybody can tell me how do you get sick in space or go to the bathroom or whatever it might be. But I think it's more that they might have heard me somewhere or recommended or whatever it might be, where and I would say it even in the U.S. audiences, it's that there's the messages that matter. Sometimes I did one in the Middle East. They were actually having a space theme, so I had a leg up, right? They had the space shuttle was part of their logo for the talk. So they're looking for a or it's a blast off theme, or they're definitely looking
Oh,
for a
yeah.
space person. I love those things because you're kind of then they're it's kind of like you have a leg up on the other folks, I guess, who aren't astronauts. But I think a lot of times it's an interest in certainly a great interest in the space program, but also the lessons that are learned in the space program. And I think there's a great admiration for what we're able to do in our country with technology and exploration. Still that picture of Neil Armstrong is still only one country that has been able to do that. I think others are going to be coming pretty quick here, including us going back there. But I think there's a lot of admiration for what we do in the space program, and in general for the way we go about our business in the United States. This has been my experience with them.
Mike, I can't thank you enough for all of your insights. I didn't even get to the future of the space program, so we're going to have you
There's a
back
lot
another
going on.
time.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. A lot of
I'm
exciting things coming down the pike, I think.
That's really exciting. And I think if there's an event planner out there that's looking for an unforgettable experience, I think you are really an inspiring choice. So I thank you so much for being so generous and telling us all the behind the scenes things. And I think it's really valuable information that'll help people know more about you and possibly have you come speak to their audience.
Well, Gail, it's a pleasure. I really have admired with you and your team what they do, and I think I said before we started rolling how honored I am to be one of your guests. Like, really, me? How did this happen? Because you guys have so many great speakers, and you do such a great job. And I've been going down there to visit was a great opportunity for me to just have a good time. And you're a dedicated group and a great team. Congratulations on your anniversary
Oh,
of
thank you.
your company's anniversary, and so I'm just really thrilled to get a chance to speak with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's go inspire audiences
Yeah,
all over. Thank
count me
you.
in.
Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.